The Sterling family estate's grand dining room gleamed under the warm light of antique chandeliers, its mahogany table set with the finest china and crystal for Dad's 65th birthday celebration. 25 family members had gathered in the mansion that had been our family seat for 3 generations. A sprawling 15,000-square-foot estate valued at $8.7 million, sitting on 40 acres of pristine countryside that had been in our family since my great-grandfather built his fortune in the steel industry. I sat at my usual spot near the end of the table, wearing a simple navy dress from a department store that cost less than what some family members probably spent on lunch. Around me, my relatives displayed their wealth like peacocks: designer clothing, expensive jewelry, and the confident demeanor that came from knowing they were part of something bigger than themselves. The Sterling family legacy represented old money, social prominence, and business success spanning nearly a century. What none of them knew was that exactly 31 days ago, I had purchased every single asset they considered family property: the estate, the vacation homes, the investment portfolio, the family business shares, and even the trust funds they thought were safely protected. While they'd been planning Dad's birthday celebration, I'd been systematically acquiring their entire world through a web of holding companies and private transactions. "Elena, sweetheart," my Aunt Patricia's voice cut through the dinner conversation, her tone carrying that familiar mixture of pity and condescension. "Are you still playing around with those computer projects? When are you planning to pursue something more substantial?" Polite laughter rippled around the table. My brother Jonathan, who held the title of vice president at Sterling Industries despite having contributed little beyond his last name, raised his wine glass with a smirk. "She's probably still living in that tiny apartment downtown, convinced she's going to revolutionize the world with websites. I tell my business associates that my sister is exploring her options because I honestly can't explain what she thinks she's accomplishing." More laughter echoed through the dining room. My sister Caroline, who'd married into another wealthy family and now spent her time organizing charity events and country club activities, examined her diamond bracelet dismissively. "I've offered to introduce her to eligible bachelors who could provide stability. A good marriage could solve so many of her problems. But she insists on this independence fantasy." I smiled politely and continued eating my roasted duck, a dish prepared by the estate's private chef, a chef who now technically worked for me since I owned the house and everything in it. The irony of the situation was almost overwhelming. Here sat my family, discussing my failures and limitations while enjoying a meal in a home I'd purchased, celebrating with wine from a cellar I now owned, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire lifestyle was currently dependent on my goodwill. Uncle Charles, Dad's younger brother and longtime partner in Sterling Industries, leaned back in his chair with the satisfied expression of a man who'd never questioned his place in the world. "Elena, your father and I have been discussing your situation. The company could probably find something for you, maybe assistant work in the marketing department. It wouldn't be executive level, of course, but it would be honest employment with family oversight." "That's generous of you, Uncle Charles," my cousin David added, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Elena really needs structure and guidance. It's not her fault she wasn't born with the Sterling business instincts, but at 31 she needs to accept reality." The conversation continued around me while I mentally reviewed the documents in my briefcase. Legal papers that would fundamentally alter every assumption being made at this table. 3 years ago, I'd walked away from my expected role in the family business to build Sterling Digital Ventures, a technology investment firm that had grown into something my traditional family couldn't comprehend. While they'd been managing their inherited wealth, I'd been creating new wealth at a scale that dwarfed their generation's-old fortune. Dad stood up at the head of the table, tapping his crystal wine glass with his silver knife. At 65, Robert Sterling still commanded respect in business circles, his silver hair perfectly styled and his bearing that of a man accustomed to deference and admiration. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the birthday patriarch. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying the authority that had served him well in boardrooms and social gatherings for 4 decades. 65 years old. It's a milestone that makes a man reflect on legacy, on what we pass down to the next generation. He looked around the table with obvious satisfaction, his gaze lingering on family members who'd met his expectations of success and proper behavior. "The Sterling family has built something remarkable over 3 generations. We've created businesses that employ hundreds of people, established a social position that opens doors throughout the region, and accumulated assets that will provide security for generations to come. Murmurs of agreement and appreciation echoed around the table. Looking at this table tonight, I see the fruits of our family's labor. Jonathan, who's proven himself capable of carrying on the Sterling Industries tradition. Caroline, who's married well and maintains our family's social standing with grace and intelligence. Both siblings beamed with pride as the room applauded their acknowledgement. We've built our success on practical principles, sound investments, proven business models, and the wisdom that comes from understanding how real wealth is created and preserved. His eyes found mine, and I saw the familiar pause, that moment where he had to decide how to address the family disappointment in front of an audience of relatives and longtime family friends. Of course, he continued, his tone shifting to something that sounded regretful, not every family member chooses to embrace these time-tested approaches to success. The room went quiet, sensing the direction of his speech. Elena decided 3 years ago to abandon her position with Sterling Industries to pursue what she calls technology ventures. Despite our attempts to guide her back to practical career choices, she's insisted on this path that has produced no measurable results. More uncomfortable silence as 25 pairs of eyes focused on me with varying degrees of sympathy and judgment. Which brings me to an important announcement, Dad continued, reaching into his jacket pocket to pull out a folded document. Your mother and I have made some difficult decisions about our estate planning. Mom nodded supportively from her seat, her expression a mixture of sadness and resolve that suggested this had been a long-discussed decision. We believe that inheritance should reward those family members who've demonstrated responsibility, business acumen, and commitment to the values that built this family's success. The tension in the room was palpable now. Everyone understood what was coming. Therefore, Dad said, unfolding the document with theatrical precision, we've decided to revise our will to reflect the reality of who has earned the right to carry on the Sterling legacy. He cleared his throat and began reading from the paper. The Sterling family estate, including this house, the vacation properties in Aspen and Martha's Vineyard, and all associated trust funds, will be divided equally among Jonathan and Caroline, with specific provisions for their children's education and future business ventures. Enthusiastic applause erupted around the table. Jonathan and Caroline looked delighted, while their spouses beamed with satisfaction at this confirmation of their family's financial security. Sterling Industries shares currently held in the family trust will be transferred entirely to Jonathan, ensuring continuity of leadership and preventing any dilution of the company's focused direction. More applause, more congratulatory glances toward my brother, who raised his glass in acknowledgement of his enhanced inheritance. As for Elena, Dad's voice carried clearly across the suddenly quiet room. Her decision to reject family guidance and pursue unrealistic ventures has consequences. We're removing her completely from all inheritance provisions. The silence that followed was heavy with shock and satisfaction. I saw several family members exchange glances that ranged from sympathy to barely concealed approval. At Dad's birthday, he announced, "We're cutting you from the will," Dad said formally, looking directly at me. Everyone cheered. And they did. The room erupted in applause, not just polite acknowledgement but genuine celebration. Uncle Charles raised his glass in a toast. Aunt Patricia nodded approvingly. Even some of the younger cousins joined in the clapping, caught up in the family's collective judgment. I looked around the table at 25 family members who were literally celebrating my financial disinheritance, their faces showing everything from relief to triumph to satisfaction that the family disappointment was finally getting what she deserved. I just smiled. "That's fine, Dad," I said calmly, maintaining my composure as the applause continued around me. The simplicity of my response seemed to surprise everyone. They'd probably expected tears, arguments, or desperate pleas for reconsideration. Instead, I just sat there, smiling peacefully while they celebrated cutting me out of the family fortune. "Elena," Mom said, her voice taking on that tone she used when she thought she was being compassionate, "we hope you understand this is about tough love. Sometimes people need consequences to motivate real change. We're not trying to be cruel," Dad added, though his satisfied expression suggested otherwise. "We're trying to help you understand that actions have consequences. Choices have results." Uncle Charles leaned forward with his best paternal expression. "It's not too late to change course, Elena. If you abandon this technology nonsense and return to Sterling Industries, we could reconsider these decisions in a few years. Assuming you prove yourself capable of real contribution, Jonathan added, clearly enjoying his new position as the sole inheritor of the family business. I was about to respond when the doorbell rang, followed by the sound of our longtime housekeeper Mrs. Davidson, walking toward the front entrance. A moment later she appeared in the dining room doorway. "Mr. Sterling, there's a gentleman here from Morrison & Associates law firm. He says he has important documents that require immediate attention." Dad looked confused. "We're not expecting anyone from the lawyers tonight." "He insists it's urgent, sir. Something about property transfers that were finalized today." "Then the lawyer arrived with documents," I said quietly, more to myself than to the room. James Morrison himself appeared in the doorway. A distinguished man in his 60s who'd been handling high-stakes legal transactions for the city's wealthiest families for over 30 years. He carried a leather briefcase and wore the serious expression of someone delivering significant news. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for interrupting your celebration, but I have documents that require immediate disclosure under state property law." Dad stood up, clearly irritated by this unexpected intrusion. "James, whatever this is about, it can wait until Monday." "Actually, it cannot, Robert. These documents pertain to property transfers that were completed this afternoon, and state law requires notification of all residents within 24 hours. James opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of legal documents. As of 4:47 p.m. today, the Sterling family estate and all associated properties have been purchased by Sterling Digital Holdings, LLC. The room went dead silent. The transaction included this house, the vacation properties in Aspen and Martha's Vineyard, all furnishings and personal property, the vintage wine collection, the art collection, and the stables. You could have heard a pin drop. The total purchase price was $47.3 million, paid in full through certified funds. Dad's face had gone completely white. "That's impossible. These properties aren't for sale." "Actually, they were. Your financial difficulties over the past 18 months created several liens and forced sale situations. Sterling Digital Holdings purchased the liens and executed their rights under the foreclosure provisions." James turned to look directly at me. "Actually, she purchased the entire estate last month," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the shocked room. "The birthday cake, our elaborate 3-tier creation that had cost more than some people's monthly salary, slipped from Caroline's hands and crashed to the floor, splattering frosting and decorative flowers across the antique Persian rug. Elena Sterling is the sole owner of Sterling Digital Holdings," James continued professionally. "She is now the legal owner of everything you're currently sitting in, eating from, and living on." The silence that followed was deafening. 25 faces stared at me in complete shock, their celebration of my disinheritance having transformed into the realization that I owned everything they just inherited. "Furthermore," James added, consulting his documents, "Sterling Digital Holdings has also acquired the controlling interest in Sterling Industries, the family trust funds, and the investment portfolios that were used as collateral for various business loans." Dad finally found his voice. "Elena, what the hell is going on?" I stood up calmly and walked to where James stood, accepting a folder of documents from him. "What's going on, Dad, is that while you were planning to cut me out of your will, I was buying everything you thought you owned." I opened the folder and pulled out the property deeds, bank statements, and corporate ownership documents. Sterling Digital Ventures, my company, generated $2.1 billion in returns over the past 3 years through technology investments. While you were all assuming I was failing, I was building wealth that makes the family fortune look like pocket change. The room erupted in chaos. Voices rose in confusion, disbelief, and panic as family members tried to process what they were hearing. "You're telling me," Jonathan said, his voice cracking, "that you own Sterling Industries?" "Controlling interest, yes. Along with this house, your trust funds, and basically everything you just celebrated inheriting." Caroline's face had gone pale. "But how is that possible? How did we not know?" "Because you weren't paying attention. You were all so busy feeling superior to the family disappointment that you never noticed your businesses were struggling, your properties were leveraged, and your lifestyle was being funded by borrowed money." I turned to address the entire room. "For 3 years, you've treated me like a failure. Tonight you literally celebrated cutting me out of the family fortune. But the truth is there is no family fortune anymore. There's just my fortune which I've been generous enough to let you continue enjoying." The silence that followed was profound. 25 family members who'd spent the evening mocking my choices and celebrating my exclusion now realized they were sitting in my house, had eaten my food, and were completely dependent on the person they'd just finished publicly humiliating. "The good news," I continued, "is that I'm not vindictive. You can all continue living here using the vacation homes and drawing from what you thought were your trust funds. Consider it my birthday gift to Dad." I gathered my belongings and headed toward the door. "But remember this moment the next time you're tempted to assume someone has failed just because they're not succeeding in ways you understand." I walked out of the dining room, my dining room in my house, leaving behind 25 shocked family members and one very ruined birthday cake. Sometimes the best response to being cut from the will isn't fighting the decision. It's owning everything they thought they were leaving to someone else.